Our next topic is ag banking. And you know, it is kind of funny with farmers that we've talked to over the years. You know, they love to talk to agronomists, and they'll talk to seed people, and they talk to their neighbors, no problem. But when it comes to talking to bankers, there are a lot of farmers that have a real difficulty doing that.
It's kind of funny though. Every once in a while a farmer will come in to talk to me, and he'll be all dressed up and all cleaned up, and I'll be like, wow, where are you going to? Oh, I got to go to the bank. There is just this different mentality when you're going to go talk to your banker. So it's important to know what to ask and to know when to ask it. Now, my question this year, if everybody needs so much more credit going into the season, do you want to be the first guy that goes in and asks to increase your line of credit? Or do you want to be the last guy that goes in? Isn't there kind of a finite pool of money that once that's used up, they may at the end of the year say, gosh, I don't know if I can increase your loan?
Okay, so let's talk just a little bit about some of the things that the banks have to think about. You know, we may think that the banks have this unlimited amount of money they can loan out, but actually they have their own internal limits for certain things, like how much money they will loan out in total to grain elevators, or how much money in total they will loan out to farmers, certain classifications, and they've got to live under some of those things. Now, if they want to go above and beyond that, they may have to work with other banks to jointly loan some money to people or things like that. But I would suggest pre-planning and talking early to the bank, because as a general rule, bankers love one thing, and that is people who have foresight. So if you have an idea what you're going to do this next year for cropping plan, what you're going to invest in that crop for fertility and seed and chemical, all those types of things, and then you communicate that properly with the banker, they like that. That's what they want. We're not here saying we want the bank to have all of your information and totally control, well, are we going to spend $20 an acre, or are we going to spend $15 an acre on this crop? You've got to make those decisions. You've got to work with your agronomist, do the best things to raise the best crop, and just present that to the banker and explain why. Say, this is why I'm doing this, and also make sure that you talk in the language of the banker. Okay, the banker doesn't care about yield. He doesn't care if you get 150 bushel of yield or 200 bushel yield. What he cares about is total dollars and return on investment. You've got to speak in those types of numbers and talk about what this certain investment is going to give you for a return, how it's going to improve things, and how you're going to repay any certain loan to the bank.
So some tips are, bring some yield data in from this fall. Maybe you've got a trial out on your farm and you said, oh, I tried some fungicide versus nothing, and I gained a bushel. Well, you go in and say, I gained a bushel to a banker, he's gonna say, you know, so what? What's the big deal? I don't know. But if you say, look, I paid $6 and I got back 12, that's pretty fantastic. You can talk to the banker about that and say, hey, look what my return on investment is now. I doubled that money in just 6 months' time by doing this. So I want to do more of that next year. Do you think the banker's going to loan you a little bit more money to do that? Absolutely. He says, wow, that guy can make 2 to 1 on the money. That'd be super, because I'm going to make 6 or 7 or 8% on him the whole way. That's great.
Yeah, and you know, this is another thing. When we talk to farmers, and a lot of guys are like, oh, I don't know if the bank's going to loan me money for this. You know what? The only way the bank makes money is if it loans you money. So the whole goal is for the bank to loan more money out, but they want to do it safely. So that's why you want to properly communicate what you're doing with this money, and you want to have a good balance sheet and those types of things, so there's something in reserve if things would happen to go wrong.
Let's talk about that balance sheet too before you get away from that.
Well,
finish your point.
Yeah,
finish your point.
The whole reason why we're talking about ag banking today is this. It's going to possibly cost you twice as much money this year as it did 2 years ago to put in your crop. Okay, in our farm, I've been running some numbers, and I think it may cost us as much as $600 or $700 an acre to put in corn. Maybe even more. It might even be $800 if we're going for 250 bushel corn. So whereas just a couple years ago it might have been $300 or $400. Those numbers have completely changed. And usually, you know, you can go into the banker and say, yep, I need just a few more dollars this year, another 10% more than what I needed last year. It's a difficult conversation when you have to walk in and say, yeah, I needed $1 million last year for my line of credit. Yeah, I need about 1.6 million this year. That's an enormous jump. And so you've got to work on communicating why all these things are up and still what that return on investment is going to be for your farm.
And if you want to have a good long-term relationship with your banker, when you have a year like this where you're actually going to make some money, put some of that money to help your balance sheet out. Pay down some debt a little bit. It's okay to buy that new planter, but maybe that new combine that you need to, you hold off for a year or two
right.
on that and cure some things up, because once your balance sheet looks better and your debt to asset ratio is improved, it's easier to talk to that banker about, look, you've made a good investment in me, I'm a safe loan, look at how I'm getting better through the years. Those are good things to communicate with that banker.
Yeah, and here's another thing, and all the bankers watching aren't going to like this very well, but unless you're borrowing your money for prime or less, you don't have a good enough balance sheet. Let's put it this way, when is the banker most likely to loan you money? When you don't need money. Okay, so if you can get your balance sheet in great shape and you don't actually need that money that desperately, you're probably going to get a better rate. And you say, well, you know, it's not that big a deal. Okay, well, if you're borrowing for 2% more than, let's say, your neighbor over a period of 40 years, how many millions of dollars did that amount to? I mean, you stop and think about it, run the numbers yourself. I mean, many farmers now are needing millions of dollars for their line of credit, $3, $4, $5 million. If you add 2% onto that every year over 40 years that you farm, it is a tremendous amount of money. So work on improving your balance sheet when you have good years like this year and hopefully next year too, and you'll get along a lot easier with your banker, and you should pay less for interest over a long period of time.
Well, one of the good things coming up with next year, the costs are going up a lot on many things, but killing this weed of the week still doesn't have to cost you a bunch. We'll show you how to kill this tough weed later in the show.